For a long time, government jobs have been seen as like a gold standard for job security and longevity. But you really have to decide whether those are going to be worth the trade-offs that often aren't really talked about. Today I want to talk about the top 5 pros and cons of working for the government so that you have a realistic view of what it actually is to work for the government if you've never been in this sector before. So pro number 1 I'm going to start with is going to be government longevity. Short of a complete collapse of society, there is always going to be government. And until you have legislators and the governor and the president being the ones to come down and process your driver's license and sweep up your streets, there are going to be government jobs for you to fill. In a world of a lot of corporate layoffs, restructuring, people losing their jobs at, top name companies, there is still a lot of stability in government work. One of the aspects that you really have to take into consideration is your job protection when you get hired in government. Oftentimes, you are going to be protected under one of two things, or maybe even both. And those will be either union protection or civil service law protection. And there is a good chance that you could be protected by both. These protections, whether you have one or both, really help you have a long government career that you're going to be able to start from day one to day end, 20 or 30 years, however long that you want to put in, and have a nice retirement at the end. So the con that goes with this is con number 1, and that is the risk of hiring freezes and furloughs. Furloughs are something we've heard a lot about in the news, especially at the federal level here recently. A lot of people, until Congress was able to pass a budget, a lot of people just weren't collecting a paycheck. They're still employed, they're still federal government employees, and they're going to go back to that job, but they're just simply not collecting a paycheck. And on top of that, a lot of those essential workers have to continue coming to work even though they're not going to get their pay when payday comes around. So it's something, it doesn't happen all the time. It's not super common, and it can happen at the federal or state or local levels, but it's something to, even though it doesn't happen a lot, it's something to take into consideration that it could be a reality for you in the off chance it does happen during your public service career. Pro number 2, government jobs come with good pay and benefits. While you're not necessarily going to make the same amount of money that you might make in a similar role at a major, multi-billion dollar corporation, there's a lot to be said for the total compensation package of a government job. What is a total compensation package? If you don't know, it's basically the sum of everything that you're offered as part of your position. So it also includes your salary, your paid time off, health benefits, vision benefits, dental, anything that goes with that. It's part of your total compensation package. And when you put all of that together, even if your salary isn't necessarily matching, the private companies out there, that package is usually really difficult to beat. And before I move on to the next con, one of the benefits that I really want to touch on and really make sure you know about is your government retirement benefit. These are often really difficult to beat, and they can come in multiple different ways, especially because there's so many different agencies and the way that they handle retirement. But generally speaking, you're going to have a pension or a traditional retirement. The pension is usually a defined benefit. And I'm not a math whiz. I can't explain exactly the way the formula works, but generally speaking, when we're talking about a defined benefit, it's going to be something to the effect of how long you served and how much you made, whether it's your top grossing years or it's your final few years, however your agency figures that out. But essentially, you're going to get a payment monthly in perpetuity based on that equation. The other type of retirement will usually be market based. So it's similar to other types of retirement system, private retirement system. Even with those, it still came with a small defined benefit. There's more if the market's doing great, but there's always something even if the market is not doing so well. So for con number 2, and this might not be a con for all of you, but when we're talking about pay, your salary is generally going to be seniority based and not merit based. So if you come into a government role and you are an exceptional employee and you work hard and you get your tasks done early, and I mean, you're cream of the crop public service employee, you are going to make the exact same salary as the person next to you who kind of rolls in a little bit late, they're a little bit slower. You guys are going to make the exact same money. They might even make more than you if they are more senior to you. So, if you are person number 2, this is actually more of a pro for you. If you're person number 1, kind of a con. Unlike in private corporations, there's not generally a lot of negotiation in your salary. There is usually some in the beginning when you're first being hired. They're going to offer you, where they want you to enter at, and you can kind of negotiate there. But once you're in, you're usually kind of locked into where you're at. The way government salaries work is generally there is going to be some kind of range and step ladder. So the ranges are going to be like where your job title falls, your occupation. For a state government, it might look like there are ranges 1 to 100. And if you are a financial analyst, you might fall into range 45, say. And range 45, has step A through M. And step A might be, $45,000 a year, all the way up to step M, which is, $78,000 a year. And all the steps in between are they're going to be raises on some kind of basis. So it might be annually. So annually, you're going to move up, say 1 or 2 steps, regardless of your merits. You're always going to move up. If you're looking for something where you're going to get increases in salaries, this is great. If you're someone who works hard and you think that you should be paid based on merit, you may have some struggles with the way that you get paid in government. And the other little piece to this, generally speaking, once you hit that top step, you are what we call topped out, which means that in that occupation, you are going to make as much as you're ever going to make, unless there's like a cost of living adjustment or something like that. Whatever that step M, step Z, that top end, that is simply what you're going to make unless you were to pivot to a different position or you were to promote. That's just where you're going to be. So moving into pro number 3, and this is one that I took a lot of advantage of in my career, is the ability to pivot. If you don't like where you're at in government, it is so much easier to move around than it is to make that initial break into government work. Once you're in, you're going to be networking. You're going to be working with people from other units in different types of jobs and even other government agencies. As you network with people, they will be able to refer you. If you look at somebody and you say, "Hey, I really like, the work that they're doing. I really want to do that job." You work with that person, they might be a good reference for you. You might be able to pit over to their unit. What's really nice about pivoting is as long as you're within the same level of government, if you're as long as you're within federal or you're within state or local, a lot of things that you have at your previous career are going to carry over with you. So, for instance, when I moved from one state agency to the next, my all of my paid time off carried over. So everything that I had banked just moved over to the next job. A lot of my seniority. So, I had, X amount of of years of career service, excuse me, all those carry over. I didn't lose everything as I would have had I, moved from one corporation to the next where you're starting over, new retirement system, new paid time off system, you lose everything that you built up. In government, as long as you're at the same level, you're generally going to keep a lot. When it comes to retirement, a lot of city and county agencies actually work off of a state retirement system. So even though you move from local to state or state to local, even if your paid time off isn't going to carry over, your retirement longevity is still going to be in effect and still going to carry over. So it's also not starting new. But to get to pro number 3, you've got to get through con number 3. And that is that it can be exceptionally difficult and a very long process to make that first break into government. I have applied for so many government positions. I've been hired in a bunch of them. And I will say that I don't think I ever had a process that did not take more than 3 months from the day I applied to the day I start. And the 3 month ones would be a exceptionally fast process. Generally speaking, you might be looking from 3 months to 6 months and sometimes even over a year from the day you applied to the day you get hired. There is a saying that government moves slow, and that is absolutely true in so many aspects, and hiring is often one of them. If you are currently in a career or in a job and you want to move into government, I highly, highly recommend stay in your position while you apply, while you interview, and while you go through that process. You don't want to lose months of salary because you jumped out of there because you thought you were going to jump right into this role. It's simply not a smart move. These roles take so long to be hired in. Stay where you're at, get that final offer. Don't leave until you have a start date. So pro number 4, and this one for me is actually number 1, is going to be your work-life balance. Now, there are a lot of government jobs, especially in like emergency management or public safety and healthcare, where there is a 24-hour clock. There's mandatory overtime. There's not as great of a work-life balance. But I would say in almost 90% of government jobs, you are working a defined schedule, and that schedule might be flexible. You're not going to work holidays. You're generally not going to work weekends. You are going to work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, bell to bell. And a lot of them don't want you working overtime. So you don't have to worry about 5 o'clock hitting and, oh, hey, I need you to stay over for a couple hours and finish this project. Generally, when that bell hits, you are going home, you are done for the day. You know what time you're going to be back home to your family. On top of that, in the work-life balance scheme of things, there's often abilities for hybrid work, remote work, especially when COVID hit. A lot of government agencies moved over to hybrid or remote work. For the last government position that I had, I was fully remote except for one day a month that I had to go into the office. But other than that, I'm working at home. And on top of this, when you work remotely, for the government, you might even get flexible scheduling. When I first started, my schedule was, 8 to 4:30, but once I had finished my probationary period, I talked to my boss and I said, "Hey, I would like to work a compressed 4:10 schedule." And they were totally fine with that. It's not going to happen everywhere. Some places need you to be working, either in the office or defined times at certain times of the day, but there are those opportunities for good work-life balance. And one of the key points that I really need to touch on before we move on is your paid time off in government is usually exceptional. By the time I left my last government role, I would collect 144 hours every year of vacation time. I collected 8 hours a month of sick leave, and I had 11 federal holidays that I got off, plus 2 personal holidays that I got to pick throughout the year. When you put all those hours together, it is about between 17 and 18% of the work year that I have as time off. Granted, that would be if I used all my sick leave, which I didn't really burn through my sick leave like that. Some people do, some people don't. Almost 20% of the year here is paid time off. You're not going to get that at a lot of private companies. When you get in a lot of private companies, some say, unlimited PTO, and that's great. But then a lot of them are like, after 1 year, you get 1 week off. And, in government, generally, you're getting a lot more than that. Got a lot of time home, a lot of time with your family, a lot of time to decompress. And I think that really can't be slept on when you're considering a government career. Now, con number 4, yes, you have a great work-life balance, but while you're at work, you are under a public microscope. As a public employee, you answer to the citizens, which means that everything you do is a matter of public record. Every time you write an email, a Teams chat. I remember in one agency that I worked for, any piece of paper that had any kind of writing on it that was given to you officially became a government record. So somebody would bring a Christmas card to somebody that I worked with. They had to read it and then archive it as a public record because it was delivered to them in their government capacity. So as part of this, you have to abide by strict ethical rules. Before I left my agency, somebody came in and did a public records request, and they wanted every Teams chat from every state employee that for I don't remember however long, but I mean, we're talking thousands and thousands. So each one of these little team chats, and these are just like instant messages that you might send between a coworker, just like you and a friend, they all had to be recorded and they're all out there for the public to read. So every time you were talking about somebody or you were talking about a legislator or maybe the governor in not such a kind way, now somebody's going to read that. And that moves over to the media. You now fall under media scrutiny. It's not a fun place to be in. And then on top of that, a lot of government levels have what they call an ethics board. An ethics board can sometimes levy fines if they find that in your role of public service, you acted in an unethical manner. For the state that I most recently worked for, we had people who were getting fined for not paying for their parking. I mean, that's how finite they got. People who used the internet too much, people who, might have sent a personal email from their government email address. All sorts of things could get you jammed up. And some of these people would face $500,000, $2,000, $5,000 fines for these things. And then on top of that, if you are found to have committed, what might not be such a big deal anywhere else, but say you destroyed a record. In my state, that's a felony. You can go to prison for that. So when you're working for government, you got to remember you're under the eye of the public. You've got to act in an ethical manner, and there's serious consequences if you don't. So pro number 5, and I think this is a really powerful one, your work is meaningful. When you work for public service, that's exactly what you're doing. You are serving the public. Your final boss is ultimately the citizen. The citizen elects in the legislators who appoint your directors who hire you. So even though your job is protected, if some of those legislators change or they change director, generally your job's protected. But ultimately, your agency and vis-a-vis you answer to the citizen. You're working to serve them. And I think that that for me was something that I really appreciated. I didn't just answer to a customer, I didn't answer to a CEO. Yes, I have my supervisors, managers, and bosses, but ultimately my work was to benefit the public, the citizens. Now, with the final con number 5, while your work is meaningful, it's government work, and in a lot of roles, it is going to be monotonous. And that's just what it is. I have said in other videos that not all jobs like this, and that's true. Not all jobs are monotonous, but there are a lot of jobs that are a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of red tape, and things move exceptionally slow. In my last position, we wanted to create a new document. I was assigned this task to draft this document in March. Within maybe a week or two, I had the document drafted through all the steps and reviews and rewrites and everything that it had to go through. We didn't release that thing until I think November. So, I mean, we're talking almost a full year just to release a document. You will feel like you're constantly dragging your feet everywhere. Things don't move quickly. It's a lot of the same documents over and over for each different citizen. The most I can say is just to hang on to the idea that for each one of these that you're doing, you're helping somebody. Even though it's the same work to you, it can mean mountains to the person that you're assisting every time you punch their information into your computer. So even though this was 5 pros and cons, I don't want to end it off on a con. So I'm going to bring one little bonus pro: education benefits. There's 2 aspects to this. One of them is going to be the public service loan forgiveness program. If you work so long in public service and you're on the right type of loan repayment program, your loan will be forgiven at the end of that period. On top of that, some government agencies at different levels offer education benefits. I have had friends who work in government who had essentially their bachelor's and their master's degree completely paid for. It's sometimes a little bit slower because they only let you take so many credits at a time, but it's there. And even if you want to just pay for part of it, the benefit of having your education partially paid for, I mean, cannot be overstated enough. So there you have it. A government career is a massive trade-off. There are a lot of pros that a lot of people know about, and there's a lot of cons that people don't really always consider. It's really going to be up to you to decide whether you want to pursue these pros in trade-off for some of these cons. If you are interested in a government career, if you want more content like this, if you want more information about getting into a government career, I'm going to consistently bring out more information. I invite you to go ahead and click that like and subscribe button to follow me, and I will see you in the next one.